What's up, Lego builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios. Well, you did it. You sat through week 1 of building Megito last week. The first update of a mod series is always one of the most boring in my opinion because I have to do a lot of planning and laying out. But getting the boring stuff done early paid off because this week I have a lot of building to do. I'm gonna be designing buildings, building bridges, hopefully fixing a big problem with one of them. And to cap off the update, I'm gonna light up part of the mock for you. So don't forget to execute Order 66 on that like button and let's get started. We're once again gonna start out with some rock work. Just kidding, gotcha. I'll save that for later. I'm gonna design one of the buildings for the city first. Megito, like most places in Star Wars, is home to some unique architecture. If I had to name it, I'd call it stacked dish architecture or stacked plate architecture because all the buildings look like stacked plates of varying sizes with windows in between. Remember that thing we all had as babies? Use that as a reference. So basically I'm building a city of baby toys. I should be able to manage that. There is, however, a decent amount of variation in what exactly the different buildings look like, so that means I won't have to build the same structure over and over again. The biggest challenge is figuring out how to make the round plate looking sections. I'm trying out some big quarter cylinder slopes with 3x slope in between to make a saucer looking thing, and lucky for me, the windows on Megito are blue, so I can stack my numerous army of blue cylinders left over from my Naboo mock to make the windows. Now that I have the general shape built, I'm going to hammer out another plate so I can start stacking them. This one seems to be the most common type of building in the city, so that's what I'm designing first. Each level is smaller than the previous one, creating a wedding cake looking structure, so I'm going to shrink each plate by 4 studs to get the same look. As I was building these, I felt like they just looked too flat and meager. The levels of the building look more like a deep dish than a plate, so I need to make mine thicker. I'm going to try building a snot frame with slopes, which I can connect underneath the saucer build, giving it some much needed thickness. I'm using slopes on their side to match the curve of the quarter cylinders, and I'll connect both together via headlight bricks. This is a good start, but the plate section still looks too thin, plus the bricks that I put on the flat sections don't line up very well with the slopes. So I made a sloped frame that was 2 studs wide, and now we have a dish. Plus the double stud frame lines up perfectly with the brick now. Now that I'm happy with the dishes, I need to build a bunch so I can stack myself a building. I'm using smaller quarter cylinders for the last couple of levels since they're so small. This isn't necessarily the actual size of the building, I'm just focusing on the design right now, so I know what pieces are going to need to be ordered in for the future. I'm also going to build a little base with a door and windows since, you got to be able to get into your house. And if I decide to do building interiors later, it'll be really easy to just throw in a bed and some furniture like what I did with Coruscant. I'm really happy with this prototype. There's still some things that need to be adjusted and finished, but the overall design is what I was looking for. There is one big problem with it still, but we'll talk about how to fix that later. I think the double stud dishes were the right choice, and the blue windows are going to add some much needed color to this mock. We don't need a repeat of Coruscant. I also have some trans yellow bricks I can use for windows to add more color variation. The tapered look was achieved nicely and honestly kind of gives this building a feudal Japan vibe, which is cool because I really like that style and time period. Plus I have something else planned that will make this mock look even more like an old Japanese village. Okay, it's time for the main event of this update, the bridge. I'm starting with the smaller secondary bridge because that will dictate where the main bridge will sit, and this one connects into a tunnel in the rock, so I need the bridge to know where and how big that will be. To me, Megito is all about bridges. This is where all the action happens, and the city is just the backdrop. Also, they're what I'm the most excited to build. I love doing real structural engineering based stuff. The Megito bridges are super thin and minimalistic. I guess they used most of the building budget on the fancy skyscrapers. So I'm going to start with some 16x16 plates, then build a retaining wall on either side so people and vehicles don't fall off. But these walls of brick and plate have a much more important purpose. They're going to keep the bridge from sagging and breaking. Because it's so thin and doesn't have a lot of support underneath, these walls will be vital to the structural integrity. And you can see, this bridge has never seen the inside of a gym because there is zero flexing going on. This bad boy is more rigid than Mace Windu. The middle of the bridge, however, not so much. To deal with that, I'm running rows of Technic brick from one edge to the other to make sure it doesn't bend, and now I'll have something to connect plate to on the bottom. And I'm leaving the rest of the bridge hollow, that way I can have places to store battery packs. And speaking of lights, I really wanted to light up both bridges, so I'm going to build some small round light fixtures. The lights on Megito are white, but I've always been more of a fan of yellow lights, plus I think that will look cooler and give this more of an industrial vibe, especially on the bridges. Plus, if I change my mind, all I have to do is swap out the yellow for clear bricks. And once those are in, I just have to tile off the rest of the wall, since you know us Lego Star Wars builders love our smooth, studless surfaces. Since so much of the bridge is light bluish gray, I wanted the floor to be dark bluish gray for that sweet contrast. And boy, this takes me back to the days of Coruscant, tiling off bases and entertainment complex floors. It's crazy to think that was only 5 months ago. Feels like it's been a lifetime. With all the snow, I figured there'd be some buildups on the bridge, so on one end, I'm going to lay out a snowy patch. I found it helps to create the general shape you want with the plate, and then place wedge plate down on top, smoothing out the rough edges and creating a real natural looking patch of whatever it is you want on the ground. And then all I have to do is fill in the rest with plate and tile. Once again, I'm very happy with the finished prototype. It exceeded my expectations. This is a great example of you don't need any crazy techniques to make something cool. You saw this come together. It's all about combining lots of simple techniques together that when compounded create a realistic and detailed finished product. I'm very happy with the snow patch too. I added a second layer on top to represent more buildup, or maybe there's something buried underneath. Okay, now that I have you invested in the video, we can talk rock work. I won't go as in depth as I did last week. I'm starting on the other side since this is where the bridge is going to butt into the mountain. I was hoping to get enough built to build the actual tunnel, but my dark bluish gray slopes are in a pitiful state. I used up a bunch of rock work in last Saturday's live stream. I stream every Saturday at around 1:30 Eastern time, building Megito live, and if you can join, you should. It's a great time. You can see Megito come together in real time, ask me questions about the build, and just chill with the community. It's a real vibe. All the practice with the snow patches last week really paid off, as I'm getting much better at transitioning from snow to rock. This section is also going to be pretty flat since the bridge will need to sit on it. I want to give a shout out to Alpha Striker 9183 and a couple of others for suggesting I use Lego teeth pieces to help with the snow transitions. I grabbed some teeth clips and decided to try it out, and I created this cool little snow patch. Not only does it look more natural, but the teeth look like icicles, so it works on multiple levels. Plus I get to work some non-brick pieces into the rock work, which makes it look a lot more interesting, so thanks for the idea. The Lego kitchen looking real cluttered these days, but that's because I've been cooking. I've had the designs for buildings and bridges floating around in my head for so long. It's nice to finally be able to get them out and see what they look like in physical form. And that rock work, while different from the other side, is looking pretty good. Quick update on the building. I'm still happy with the design. Even the base turned out good, and I just threw that together to hold up the dishes, but I'll probably change it when the time comes. The only two issues I have with it are, first, the quarter cylinders used for the dishes. They're pretty expensive and hard to find, and a single building uses 20, so that's not great, but I can't think of a better way to get that round look. Sometimes you gotta pay that extra price to get what you want. The second issue is the height. These are supposed to be very tall and skinny buildings, but mine are short and stout. I don't want to make the dish sections even wider to include more, because I think any wider than this and the building's just not going to look good or be as accurate. So I think I'm going to build 2 dishes at each width instead of just one. This will be like combining 2 buildings together, thus giving me double the height while the building will stay at its current width. But that does mean double the amount of quarter cylinders will be needed. The bridge is my favorite thing I did this week. I set it up on the support just to get an idea of what it will look like, and it looks amazing. This should give you guys a good idea of what I have planned for both bridges, since even though the main bridge will be a lot bigger and the lights will be different, the overall design will most likely be the same. I ran out of the rounded yellow pieces for the lights, so that's why these are square. They're just placeholders to help me figure out some spacing. Now there is one thing I want feedback on. I don't like how flat the sides of the bridge are, so I added some studs into one side and built this panel using the same slopes as I did on the top and bottom of the bridge. I feel like adding this on the side will make the retaining walls look much smoother and more like an actual bridge. But let me know down below in the comments which option you like better, A or B, slopes or no slopes. Okay, last but not least, we have the rock wall. I've been integrating more plate into the rock work by staggering them on top or below each other to create steps, and it's paying off. The only problem I have is I built this great patch of snow, but forgot the bridge is going to sit right above it. So unless you look from underneath, you're not even going to see it. What a waste. I don't know yet where I'm going to integrate this patch of icicles, but believe me, it and many more will be included in the build because it's super cool. Thanks again to the people who suggested it. Now to solve the problem of the bridge and how it connects to the rockwork, because as of right now, it ain't gonna work. I've been making the rockwork kind of rounded to make it look more like a mountain, but I left one part fairly flat because this is where the bridge will go. Now here's the problem. If the bridge were going straight into the mountain, I could just connect it like this, but that would be too easy. I want the bridge to come in at an angle like this, which creates a big gap on one side, and I can't have any of my precious clones accidentally falling off. So I'm going to build a big wedge to fill in the gap. The reason I want the bridge coming in at an angle is purely aesthetic. Lego is all about right angles, squares, and blocks, so working in other shapes and angles really helps set your builds apart and makes them more interesting. And you can see this wedge piece will allow me to secure the bridge to the rock at a pretty nice angle. How I'm going to connect the angled side to the mountain is still a mystery, but I'll save that for future Ethan. He loves it when I do that. Now that the wedge plate is built, it's time to connect all the dots and see if my idea will actually work. I don't know about you, but that is a pretty smooth connection. The wedge allows the bridge to connect perfectly and gives it this sweet angle of entry. Seeing the two bridges crisscross each other when this mock's done is going to be pretty cool. I know I promised lights, so here's a quick look at what I will be lighting the second bridge with. I'm not going to go in depth on what I'm using or where I get everything, but if you're interested, I made a full lighting tutorial talking about all that and how to install Lego lights into your builds. I'll put a link to that in the comments. You can see these lights are going to add an industrial, gritty vibe to the build, which is what I wanted. That's my rule of thumb when it comes to working with lights. If you think they can enhance the build, go for it, but I don't add lights just to have them in a mock because in my opinion, the result can be underwhelming depending on the build. It all depends on your vision and how you plan on using them. This update was a lot of work, not only from a building standpoint, but an editing and filming one as well. I'm changing the way I film and edit these update videos, which requires a lot more work, but I'm hoping it should make them more interesting and immersive for you guys. And I'm excited for next week because it's going to be all about minifigs. The Galactic Marine is the main clone I'll be using in the build, and Lego never made any, so I'm going the custom route, and let me tell you, these are the most complicated and expensive minifigs I have ever had to source. I'm going to be going over the process of sourcing, decaling, and assembling them, as well as showing you guys a custom flame trooper I created and where I got my Commander Bakara. All that being said, that wraps up this update. Don't forget to let me know what you thought about everything down below in the comments, and I will catch you next time, but until then, happy building.